Hi. Just gonna give it a couple moments for people to show up. Hey, Kristen. Hi, everybody. Hello. Just gonna give a few minutes for people to join. It's nice to see you all tonight. As you probably know, this is gonna be an unconventional chat, but I am really excited about it, and I have spent all day preparing and doing my homework and making your lives easy so that you can just listen. Also, thank you for the Addie love. Yeah, 4 months from today. It comes out 4 months from today, which is terrifying. I have a lot of feelings about it and a lot of fear. Hi, everybody. But I am not here tonight to talk about Addie. There will be plenty of time to talk about Addie LaRue. You will not be able to get away from me talking about Addie tonight my time, today your time, or maybe the middle of the night or the first thing in the morning is going to be a little bit different because today I am going to be telling you about some amazing books. As I said, I'm just going to give it a few minutes for people to file in. Thank you so much. If you're in the comments, let me know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you notice, my amazing sweatshirt is in reverse, but it says Anosh. It's from Jordan Dean. It's wonderful. Also, I am so angry because I basically made a PowerPoint and of all the covers that I'm going to talk about, not realizing that Instagram Live reverses all of the images. So you're going to see all of the covers backwards. I'm sorry. You're still going to see pretty covers. Oh, we've got people from all over. It's France here. That's where I am. So it's like 9 o'clock at night. But I'm not drinking tonight because I want to stay focused. It's very ironic that I'm doing this chat, not because I shouldn't be doing this chat, but because I am the worst person possible to pitch other people's books because I'm terrible. Like, I'm great at pitching my own books and I'm really, really bad at pitching other people's. I'm kind of, when I love a book, I become that meme, that gif that's just like someone chucking a book at somebody else saying, read this book, read this book. That's kind of my philosophy. People will be like, oh, did you like that book? And I'll be like, yeah. And they'll be like, what was it about? And I'll be like, it was just great. Just read it. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more articulate tonight. I'm probably also going to sit cross-legged. Hold on. In talking about these books, because they're wonderful, I have made like so many notes for myself because I want to do them justice. And I am just patently terrible about talking about books. But here's the thing. The reason that I wanted to do this, one is because who doesn't love adding books to your TBR pile, but also I saw this really interesting conversation take place. I've seen this kind of response repeatedly online. Yes, I'm engaging in gay sitting, but this is important. I'm going to get through this. A lot of times, a lot of readers, myself included for a very long time, didn't think about the identities of the authors. They just think about the books. And that's wonderful on the surface, right? They're like, oh, I don't really pay much attention to the author, their gender, their sexuality, their race, where they're from. I just focus on the book. And that is really great in theory. The problem is there's this philosophy that we as consumers, as readers, engage with something 4 to 5 times before we buy it. Maybe you see an advertisement for it, maybe you see the cover, maybe you hear, or read a review. And the problem is that even though you might not be biased about the books that you're reading, publishing is. Publishing systematically mutes certain voices, diminishes certain voices, and promotes other voices. And the voices and books that publishing consistently promotes loudest are white narratives. And so what that means is even if you're not intentionally picking white authors and white narratives, because you're usually engaging with a product multiple times before you buy it, the likelihood is that you're going to be seeing and engaging with books by white authors much more than you're going to be engaging with books by authors of marginalized races, sexualities, etc. And so until publishing corrects this problem, until it's, there's some kind of equity and equality, it's kind of our job as a reader to be more discerning and to be more interrogative about the things that we're reading. We need to seek out narratives that aren't necessarily the ones that are being continually given to us. So it's not that you're necessarily exerting bias, or might not be thinking that you're exerting bias as a reader. You're just reaching for what excites you. But systematically, if 9 out of the 10 things that you see that are presented to you are by white authors, because those are the voices that are lifted up, you're just so much less likely to be picking up books by Black authors. And so that is why I'm trying to do this tonight. I'm going to be telling you about 20 books. All the way, I'm going to start at middle grade, because I don't really know picture books that well, but I'm going to start at middle grade, and I'm going to walk you all the way through, try and hit every genre possible. As I said, I'm terrible at this because I have such a terrible memory for things that I love. So a few times I'm going to probably read you a little bit of information about the books. I'm just going to try and expand your TBR pile a little bit by telling you about some books that I love that you might not have heard of yet. So I'm hoping to be one of those 5 touch points for books that you might not have heard of. All right, so let's just dive right in, okay? And like I say, I'm very annoyed because I basically made a PowerPoint of all of these covers, and I realized as soon as I show them to you, they're going to be reversed. So I apologize in advance, but here we go. First book I want to tell you about, middle grade realistic fiction, is called A Good Kind of Trouble. And yes, the live will be saved. A Good Kind of Trouble, I just want you to be able to see the cover for each book. A Good Kind of Trouble is by Lisa Moore Ramey, and it is a really, really delightful middle grade realistic fiction. Full confession, I'm about halfway through and I'm really loving it right now. And from everything that I've seen, I'm going to continue loving it. But A Good Kind of Trouble, Lisa Moore Ramey, it's voicey. It's really kind of that perfect sweet spot of middle grade. It's set in junior high, and it's about a girl who does her best to stay out of trouble, a girl named Shayla. And she has that kind of personality that I think many of us had in middle school and in junior high, where you just want to avoid trouble at all costs. And that's going great, except the thing about junior high is that your life starts to fall apart, and all of a sudden trouble is finding her everywhere, from her uncomfortable classmates to her changing friend circles to the fact that her older sister is becoming involved in the Black Lives Matters campaign, and Shayla is not actually sure how invested she wants to be in these increasing matters. And so over the course of the book so far, she's discovering that while you might want to avoid difficult things, you might want to avoid trouble, there are times when you need to find that threshold for your own discomfort, right? She participates in a powerful protest. That's where the point that I've gotten to right now. And she is basically starting to discover that it's not as simple as just staying out of trouble. So it's a delightful, highly realistic middle grade. If highly realistic middle grade is less your bag and you want something with a little bit more fantasy, next book that I'm going to tell you about, Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. If you have not seen this book on your radar, I do not know what you're doing with your life. Tristan Strong is by Kwame Mbalia. And again, I'm going to post a list of all of these books afterwards, so don't worry. Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. Okay, it was pitched as a middle grade American gods set in a richly imagined world populated with African American folk heroes and Western African gods. It is so delightful. It's one of the books in the Rick Riordan Presents series. They're just, basically, if it's got the Rick Riordan Presents label on it, you probably can't go wrong. They're really wonderful books. The plot in a nutshell, again, I'm so bad at plot. I just want to be read the books. If I tell you the names of the books in this chat, I want you to just read them. But in case you need convincing, it's about Tristan Strong. We come in, we meet him at the story at a point where he failed to save his best friend in a bus accident. And the only thing that he has left from his best friend is a journal in which his friend wrote down these stories. And he gets sent to Alabama, I believe, to his grandparents' house to kind of recover from the accident emotionally. And while there, one of the first things that happens is something mysterious and vaguely supernatural steals his friend's journal. And in going to get the journal back, he accidentally cracks open a world, like kind of the Mid-Pass, which is kind of like a Midgard. It's very Norse mythology. And so it's kind of Midgardian plus like the Rainbow Bridge, but he essentially cracks open a world and steps into the middle of a battle between like the African American folk heroes, like Black American folk heroes, and goes on an incredible adventure. It's just so good. I love it. If you want your middle grade to have a little bit more magic in it, then yes. And for everyone joining, don't worry, there will be a list of all of these book titles, especially. But I'm going to show you the covers, even though they're backwards, because I spent a really long time gathering all of my information. This is Tristan Strong, Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia. And yes, a lot of the books that I'm going to be talking about have LGBTQ representation as well, because I think that intersectionality is really important. And we have to remember that just because a person has one identifier doesn't mean that they're excluded from another. So when I remember, I will try and tell you when a book has an overt queer narrative as well. So middle grade realistic fiction, I got you with A Good Kind of Trouble. Middle grade, slightly more supernatural, paranormal, fantasy fiction, I've got you with Tristan Strong, Punches a Hole in the Sky. Now, on to YA. First YA I want to tell you about, I read a couple years ago, so I'm going to do my best to remember it, is E.B. Zaboy's American Street. That's what the cover looks like. But again, I just am showing this because I'm really angry that this is not working for me. So, E.B. Zaboy's American Street is about a girl named Fabiola. She's moving from Haiti to the U.S. with her mom, and her mom gets detained by U.S. immigration. And so almost immediately the plans go astray. And instead of moving to the United States as she planned, she ends up with her American cousins in Detroit. It's a story about her attempts to adapt to this strange new life and this strange new world and environment without losing her way. Honestly, I put it on this list, one, because the story's wonderful, but E.B. Zaboy's writing is just extraordinary. I found it so captivating. Also, it was a National Book Award finalist, as are several of the books on this list. Really wonderful, very immersive, realistic YA fiction. Now, if you're more of a YA fantasy fan, and I'm very excited because this author is actually going to be my next guest next week on No Right Way when it resumes, is The Bells by Danielle Clayton. And even though the cover's backwards, I have to show you because it's just so pretty. Look at this. Look at this. Okay, we have to talk about The Bells by Danielle Clayton. And the reason we have to talk about The Bells, many reasons, is it is one of my favorite kinds of narratives in that it is a fantasy narrative that has such a fabulous through line of commentary, of incisiveness. So if you don't know about The Bells is about, it's set in a fantasy world, a fantasy landscape called Orleans. I would imagine it's a little bit, South meets French. And it is about beauty and beauty standards and the concept of beauty as a commodity and as power. Essentially, the people in the world are born gray, and these individuals known as the Bells have the ability to make them beautiful. So it's about the concept of what is beautiful, about the standards, about how beauty is perceived and how it's weaponized. Danielle Clayton has this ability to tell a story on multiple levels. Whether it's fantasy or reality. You might know her work from Tiny Pretty Things. You might know her work from We Need Diverse Books. She's an incredible advocate as well, and I can't wait to talk to her next week for that. But The Bells is just an instantly immersive, wonderfully incisive, beautifully written YA fantasy. And so if you haven't read it, it should automatically go onto your list. Now, say you want something completely different, or say you want to read a YA and you're just not sure where to start and you want an introduction to a lot of new voices. One of the best ways that you can be introduced to new voices in kind of a sampling way is an anthology. The beautiful thing about picking up an anthology is that you get to meet 12 to 16 authors' voices in one book. One, short stories are amazing, and I love short stories, but also it's really a great way to encounter new authors that write in a way that you are going to be excited about. It's kind of like whiskey. It's really difficult to buy whiskey because whiskey's expensive and you don't know if you're going to like it. But the beautiful thing about anthologies is it's kind of a taster. It's kind of a sampling. And so the anthology that I really want to recommend for you to pick up, also one of the prettiest covers I've ever seen, is A Phoenix First Must Burn. Also, I am sorry again for having this cover backwards, but look at it. Oh, it's so pretty. Okay. A Phoenix First Must Burn is an anthology edited by Patrice Caldwell. It is in honor of Octavia Butler. It's really, I believe the quote is like, to rise from the ashes of Phoenix first must burn. And it is such a beautiful anthology. It is labeled as 16 stories of Black girl magic, resistance, and hope. It honors Octavia Butler, one of the most famous and important science fiction fantasy authors. It honors her legacy while kind of introducing you to the new wave. These incredible talents. To quote, every now and then I'm going to quote stuff because I feel like they said it better than I can. The quote for the Phoenix First Must Burn anthology is, A Phoenix First Must Burn will take you on a journey from folk tales retold to futuristic societies and everything in between. Filled with stories of love and betrayal, strength and resistance, this collection contains an array of complex and true-to-life characters in which you cannot help but see yourself reflected. Witches and scientists, sisters and lovers, priestesses and rebels. The heroines of A Phoenix First Must Burn shine brightly, and you will never forget them. It is wonderful. And like the thing about an anthology is you probably won't love all of the stories equally, but that's kind of the perfect thing about an anthology, is that it's a chance, as I said, to meet new authors and to see who does speak to you. And maybe you'll find 3 or 4 authors whose work you haven't read and you'll love their story and their voice, and then that will prompt you to go and pick up their work. So it's kind of a really great sampler. Also, someone saying that it was on Kindle for 99p. Don't know if that's in the UK or the US, because 99p makes me think that it's in the UK. But you should also check out and see, there's been a lot of amazing deals going on right now because publishers are seeing an opportunity and realizing that they need to make these works a lot more accessible. Okay, so I've told you some middle grade realism, middle grade fantasy, YA realism, YA fantasy, YA anthology. And now I've got a couple that I feel like have a little bit more crossover from the YA into the adult space. The first one is Torteen, published by Charlotte Nicole Davis, The Good Luck Girls. You see, look at how badass that extraordinary cover is. So this is Charlotte Nicole Davis's debut, The Good Luck Girls. It's like a dystopian Western. And it's very badass. And Danielle Clayton from The Bells called it a dust-filled bloody fairy tale. And I think that might be one of the best ways I've heard it described. The plot, this is one of those ones where the plot was really well done, and so I'm going to just read you the plot. When Astor's sister Clementine accidentally murders a man, the girls risk a dangerous escape and harrowing journey to find freedom, justice, and revenge in a country that wants them to have none of those things. Pursued by the land's most vicious and powerful forces, both living and dead, their only hope lies in a bedtime story passed from one girl to another, a story that only the youngest or most desperate would ever believe. It's going to take more than luck for them all to survive. It's like a gunslinging dystopian Western. And so, what else do you need to know? This is The Good Luck Girls by Charlotte Nicole Davis. And so that's my first of the two that I'm going to tell you that I feel like has a little bit more crossover, kind of exists in that liminal space. The second one that I'm going to tell you about, I feel like you're probably hearing about this book everywhere, and as you should, and that is Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. Tochi was my guest last week on this program. I always called it a program, like it was a real thing and not just an Instagram live on a Saturday. But in case you aren't already aware of Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi, it is one of the most important books that I have read in recent memory. It's a slim but powerful novel. Tochi's way with words is incredible in any form, in any format, but this book in particular it's so weird because I want to say that it feels like it's made for this moment, but any members of the Black community know that this moment has been going on for them for a very long time. It's just coming to the full spotlight for many of the rest of us. But Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi is about, it's like police brutality meets superpowers. That's like not the right way to describe it. It's only like 170 pages, so I feel like you should just read it. I told you this was going to devolve into me just saying you should just read these books that I recommend. But in the interest of trying to explain these books worse than their authors would explain them, Riot Baby is set against a backdrop very much like the one we see ourselves in now, and it follows two siblings, Ella and Kevin. And Ella has what's called a thing. That's how she calls it. But it's basically the beginnings of superpowers. And not just superpowers, but extraordinary, like world-altering, break cities apart kind of superpowers. And it's about her, and it's about her brother, Kevin. And it starts from childhood, and it follows them as they grow up, and as Kevin is incarcerated, and as Ella's superpowers develop so that she can not only, like move objects and destroy things, but also see the future. And it's about, the decisions she's going to have to make in terms of how revolutionary, the two of them really have to decide how revolutionary to be in this new world when she has the ability to level cities. It is beautiful. It is not an easy read in terms of, I feel like you can see how much Tochi put into it in terms of sheer heart and soul, which I feel like if you saw Tochi's piece in Tor.com very recently, you can see he writes with his heart and his soul, but this is just an absolutely extraordinary book. Okay, we're moving into the adult recommendations. Strap in. Oh God, I'm so bad at this. I'm sorry. Okay, my first adult recommendation is The Changeling by Victor Laval. I believe it's pronounced Victor Laval. I've never actually... This is what the cover looks like. I know the covers are backwards. I'm only showing them to you so that you can recognize them when you go to find the book on your online bookstore after this, okay? This is The Changeling in reverse by Victor Laval. This is one of the weirder books that I have ever read. That's kind of the problem, though, is I gravitate towards books that kind of defy easy explanation. I gravitate towards books that are just weird, and you're like, it's so weird, and I love it, because you never know when you stand. The thing about The Changeling is it's about generational trauma. It's part fairy tale and part fever dream. It blurs the line between the fantastical and the real, and so because of that, as the reader, you're never really sure where things stand. And that's fine because neither is the protagonist. I'm going to try and read you. Actually, I'm not even going to read you. I copied down the pitch for it. I just kind of want you to take my word on this one. Laval is really well known within the genre community, and he wrote another book called The Ballad of Black Tom, which is about magic in Jazz Age New York. Really, everything he writes is amazing. This is a very hard book to describe. It's about perception and reality, and it's about distrusting your sense of the real, because the book kind of devolves into a dream that you're not sure if it's a dream or not. You're not sure if the main character is perceiving the world in a realistic way. So, The Changeling by Victor Laval. I haven't read The Ballad of Black Tom yet, but I just bought it yesterday because I was going through my list and I was like, what don't I already own? So it's a great way to just discover things. But yeah, Victor Laval is somebody that I just inherently recommend. This next author is also somebody that I kind of feel like you can't go wrong with. She is also a very well-known name, but not for the book that I'm going to tell you about. So the next book I'm going to tell you about is The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. Okay, now, if you are a member at all of the online science fiction fantasy community, you have probably heard of N.K. Jemisin. That is because N.K. Jemisin is not only amazing, but a very, very, very well-recognized and well-awarded author in science fiction and fantasy. And she's become really well known for the 5th season, which is, it's called the Broken Earth series. I'm looking up, I have notes. Of course I have notes. The Broken Earth series is probably the one I feel like she's best known for, but my favorite N.K. Jemisin series is called the Inheritance Trilogy, the first book of which is The 100,000 Kingdoms. I am not going to try to explain this book to you because it would be like trying to explain Game of Thrones, because I always say that if you actually want like really, really good political, societal tensions and games and like basically a better Game of Thrones, that you should probably read N.K. Jemisin. They're really intricate and really complex. They're not the lightest reads, but they are so well written that you just kind of fall into them. She's known for this intricate world building. She is very, very good at it. I just find them really intensely enjoyable and immersive fiction. So if you like Game of Thrones, or if you were wishing Game of Thrones was like less rapey and more diverse and more interesting, I feel like the Inheritance Trilogy is a really, really good way to go. To give you the most bare bones take on it, it is, it's about a woman from the fringes of a capital who's summoned to that capital after her mother's death. And when she gets there, she's very surprised to find that she has been named heir to the kingdom. And in being named heir to the kingdom, she is thrown into this sudden political power struggle with cousins she didn't even know she had. And it's just basically wonderful. Not small, not simple. I'm trying to give like a full variety. So if you are a Game of Thrones style fantasy reader looking for something either different or better, I highly, highly recommend the Inheritance Trilogy. All right. Now for sci-fi, say you were like, I do feel like there's like a scene in John Wick where he goes and he's like, give me all of, like, he goes to a wine tasting, which just means he wants a variety of weapons. And the guy like lays out and he's like, and for an after dinner snack. And I do feel like that's where I am right now. So I'm continuing to give you for like an after dinner. Now for next, for sci-fi, I recommend River Solomon's An Unkindness of Ghosts. Do you see? It's a very, very, very cool cover. So anyway, River Solomon's An Unkindness of Ghosts is a sci-fi set on a highly segregated spaceship that ferries people to a mythic promised land. Aster, it's interesting because like there's another book, I think Good Luck Girls also had an Aster in it, but Aster belongs to the lower class, generations oppressed by a brutal overseer, and she finds out a way to change her life and her future, but it involves a civil war aboard a ship. And I always think any story gets better aboard a ship because it gives you like a place you cannot escape from, right? It is the most obvious metaphor for enforced confinement. And so I love that. And it's not an easy book. It is a very queer book. And it's not an easy book, and it's not a happy book, but it's a very, very powerful book. And I think it's absolutely wonderful for that. The setting is also just one of those ones that's like designed to magnify tension. So spaceships for the win, basically. So that, if you missed it, was An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. Okay, next one is, I decided I was like, I'll throw in a near future dystopia as well. So next one is called The Record Keeper. And yes, there will be a list of all of these. The Record Keeper by Agnes Gamillion. I hope I am pronouncing that right. Also, yes, I saw there were a few trolls in the thread, and I'm trying to ignore them. If I see them again, I will boot them out, but I don't know how, and I have to catch them fast. Okay, The Record Keepers by Agnes Gamillion. Also, how pretty. Very cool. So, The Record Keepers, in case you haven't heard of it, it's a fairly recent release, is set after World War III, and the world has come to this one's very on the money for right now. Hold on. Report, let's see. Hold on. All right. So The Record Keeper is set in a near future dystopia after World War III, and the world has come to this very, very tense, reluctant truce, which is dependent on everyone following every law all the time, or else the peace will be shattered. So as you can imagine, like, it's this very, 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 very tense, almost kind of like our world. So even though it's a near future dystopia, it's about this, basically a kettle being ready to boil over. It's about peace, and it's really, though, an examination of what peace is worth when it comes at the cost of absolute control. And so I felt like I had to include that one in here because, I mean, it feels like it's perfect for where we are right now. It's a perfect reflection of that time. Now, for something completely different, I had to include a litfic. If you missed that was The Record Keeper by Agnes Gamillion. Don't worry, all of these will be recapped at the very end. So I read a lot of books. I read about 100 books a year, and I try and make sure that I keep them across the full spectrum. And this one came out just a few months ago. This is for my adult litfic readers, people who like their realistic literary fiction. This is Real Life by Brandon Taylor. It is absolutely wonderful. Again, sorry for the reverse covers. That's how it's going to go tonight. But Real Life by Brandon Taylor. Hold on, I dropped my water. It's realistic fiction. It's about a gay black student named Wallace at a Midwestern biochemistry program. It follows his struggles with, his sexuality and relationships. Not sexuality in that, I mean, he's out, but it follows his relationships. It follows him in graduate school as he struggles to combat violence and attraction and antagonism in all of its many forms, from microaggressions to outright sabotage in his department. It's a really internal book. Like, it's a very introspective one, but Brandon Taylor is such an adept hand with his prose that even though it wasn't necessarily like a subject matter I would automatically gravitate toward, I already knew Taylor's writing, and so I was really excited about it, and it honestly didn't let me down. I read it in like a day and a half. So moving on, for romance, I chose, God, some of these covers are really tiny, and I'm sorry, hold on. I tried to give a selection so that everybody could find something here. For romance, I chose The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. Because every now and then I just like a romance, you guys. Especially in the times we're living in, sometimes you just want a romance. The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory has one of my favorite tropes as well, which is the fake date. And who doesn't love a fake date? Like, the fake date trope, or like the fake boyfriend, girlfriend, I mean, it's the To All the Boys I've Loved Before thing, except it's just taken to the extreme. So this is the fake date trope in one of my favorite forms. It's about a groomsman named Drew. He is dreading going to his ex's wedding, and he doesn't have a date until he is trapped in an elevator with Alexa, and he ends up asking her to go to this wedding with him, to his ex's wedding, as his fake date. And of course, they end up having an amazing time and hitting it off, and then they don't want it to end, but they live in completely different cities, and they're professionals living completely different lives, and it's sexy and delightful. And if you are just looking for some lovely, luscious, fluffy escapism right now, I highly, highly recommend. And I think Jasmine has like 4 books after that. So if you fall down that rabbit hole, then like you're good to go for at least a couple weeks. Okay, let's say we're now moving into one of my favorite sections of narrative, which is, yes, I read 100 books a year, but I almost said a guilty pleasure. I don't actually believe in guilty pleasures. I have a pleasure. And my pleasure is nonfiction, specifically memoirs and essays and autobiographies and such. And it's because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and memoirs and essays and nonfiction and autobios are usually narrated by the author. And I just love that. It's like getting a capsule into their mind, and you get to have their voice in your ear. And so we're getting into the nonfiction recommendations. The first nonfiction recommendation I have, that cover got very large. Samantha Irby. If you have not read or listened to Samantha Irby, you really need to rectify this, okay? I picked her first book, even though I have listened to all three. Her first book is called We Are Never Meeting in Real Life, Essays. And each one of her books has an animal on the cover and is a very bright color, so you can find them very easily. I have to tell you, I think we just pick voices, like narratives, that just delight us. And if you are looking for a way into a space that is not yours, if you're looking for an understanding or looking for insight and you're feeling a bit daunted because becoming informed about causes, becoming informed about lives that are not like yours can be daunting. I saw a really good post on it a couple of days ago that's like, you need to pace yourself because you can't be in this to be understanding and advocating for a day or a week. You need to help be part of change. And in order to be part of change, you need to really do some work to understand anyone whose perspective is not your own. So in that vein, I've actually tried to pick some really fun nonfiction titles that I feel like are both fun and informative, that are both entertaining and educational. And I feel like Samantha Irby is absolutely one of those. The note that I wrote to myself here is, she is so fucking funny. She is, though. This is the first of 3 essay collections. I'd honestly recommend them all. I buy them in audio. I find myself doing housework or errands or chores just to have an excuse to be listening to them. And I put in this quote, because I just was like, how do I sum this up? So this is actually the pitch for Irby's first collection. Whether Samantha Irby is talking about how her difficult childhood has led to a problem making adult budgets, explaining why she'd be the new bachelorette, detailing a disastrous pilgrimage/romantic vacation to Nashville to scatter her estranged father's ashes, sharing awkward sexual encounters, or dispensing advice on how to navigate friendships with former drinking buddies who are now suburban moms, she's as deft at poking fun at the ghosts of her past life as she is capturing powerful emotional truths. I would highly recommend listening to Samantha Irby. I'll tell you with the next few here, I would highly recommend listening to most of them if you can, because I do feel like having Irby's narration just added a whole extra level of enjoyment to this. Now, for something completely different, but if I could pick one book from the 20 that I'm going to recommend to you, if I had to pick one as quote unquote required reading, or one as like, please take it upon yourself from an educational perspective to like, please read this next book. The book that I'm going to tell you about it's called When They Call You a Terrorist. That's what the cover looks like. It's very bright colors. It's by Patrice Concolers and Asha Bendel. This is one of the most impactful books I've ever read. It is a memoir that is extraordinarily personal. I would say it's definitely as personal as it is political. It's about about one of the women who started the Black Lives Matter movement. It's an incredible memoir about intersectionality, really, and the ways that the deck is stacked against certain communities. I listened to it, but I honestly feel like you could listen to it or you could read it. I found it accessible and in-depth. I feel like the book helped me understand the foundations of the movement, a movement which until I read the book I had really only seen as like hashtags and people talking about it online. And from Patrice's site, I feel like she put it best on her site. It says, quote, "Leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement have been called terrorists and a threat to America, but in truth, they are loving women whose life experiences have led them to seek justice for those victimized by the powerful. In this meaningful, empowering account of survival, strength, and resilience, Patrice Cullors and Asha Bendel seek to change the culture that declares innocent Black life expendable." And I truly feel like if I could ask you to read one of the, like only one, I hope you will read many more than one, but I feel like I would really, really strongly encourage you all to pick up this book. I found it incredibly helpful and insightful and just extraordinarily moving. Next, again, I love funny essayists, all right? I love funny essays and memoirs, and a recent one that I read was called Here for It, or How to Save Your Soul in America by R. Eric Thomas. I can't remember if it was Vulture or Vogue that our Eric Thomas wrote for previous to his book, but it's a memoir / essay collection hybrid. Quote, from stories about his time as a gay Black student at a bucolic white prep school to meditations on what it means to be, quote, normal in Trump's America, Thomas's essays are a series of sometimes melancholy, always exuberant studies on what it means to live on the margins. It is delightful. I found it really, really funny. I found the voice hugely accessible. Oh, he wrote for Elle. Thank you so much, Emily. And I was just a joy. I think I listened to it in a single day. And not because it's short, but because when I love an audiobook, I just find myself, like, I think I was signing tip-in sheets or something, signing pieces of paper. I could not stop listening to it. So I highly recommend, again, that one is narrated by our Eric Thomas. I highly recommend listening to it. Last one that I'm going to recommend on the listening front is You Can't Touch My Hair and Other Things I Still Have to Explain by Phoebe Robinson. Phoebe Robinson is so funny, and I feel like that's a common thread in a lot of the audiobook autobiographies and memoir collections that I listen to, is that they are very funny, but there is so much truth in that humor. And it's a really wonderful, it's a really wonderful way to like learn and get outside of your own perspective and also just be hugely entertained. You Can't Touch My Hair, she has a second collection now, but she discusses race and feminism with so much wit and humor, and she never loses her edge. Like, it's a very biting wit. I could do an entire TBR boost probably that's just made of comedian and celebrity memoirs. But, cause like I couldn't decide whether to choose this one or Issa Rae's Misadventures of an Awkward Black Girl or Tiffany Haddish's Last Black Unicorn or Gabrielle Union's We're Gonna Need More Wine. But I did feel like this book was the most, insightful is probably not the right word, but, I just loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And again, I would recommend that one in audio. So the last 3 books I want to tell you about aren't out yet. So these are 3 books that I'm really, really looking forward to, that I want to let you know about so that you can put them on your list so that you can be aware of them as well. The first one, and because I haven't read them yet, because they're not out yet, I have their little pitches that I'm going to tell you. The first one is Tiffany D. Jackson's Grown. Also, how amazing is this cover? Look at that cover. I am obsessed with it. It looks beautiful. So Grown by Tiffany Jackson comes out, I think it's either late summer or early fall. And the pitch alone makes me so, so excited. When legendary R&B artist Corey Fields spots Enchanted Jones at an audition, her dreams of being a famous singer take flight, until Enchanted wakes up with blood on her hands and zero memory of the previous night. Who killed Corey Fields? Before there was a dead body, Enchanted's dreams had turned into a nightmare, because behind Corey's charm and star power was a controlling dark side. Now he's dead, the police are at the door, and all signs point to Enchanted. It's kind of got everything that I like, right? And the cover is amazing, and I can't wait for it, and I hope that you'll put it on your lists as well. The next one has maybe one of my favorite covers of all time. P. Djeli Clark's Ring Shout is, needless to say, a very, very, very striking cover. Wait until I read you the pitch for this one. Ring Shout is a dark fantasy historical novella that gives a supernatural twist to the KKK. In America, demons wear white hoods, it says. In 1915, the birth of a nation cast a spell across America, swelling the Klan's ranks and drinking deep from the darkest thoughts of white folk. All across the nation, they ride, spreading fear and violence among the vulnerable. They plan to bring hell to earth, but even Ku Kluxes can die. Standing in their way is Maurice Boudreau and her fellow resistance fighters, a foul-mouthed sharpshooter and a Harlem hellfighter. Armed with blade, bullet, and bomb, they hunt their hunters and send the Klan's demons straight to hell. But something awful's brewing in Macon, and the war on hell is about to heat up. Can Maurice stop the Klan before it ends the world? I mean, like, I love everything about it. I actually have an arc of it that I'm planning on starting this week, and I'm so excited. So yes, that one comes out a week after Addie LaRue. So really nice way to like, boom, boom. You've got your reading for 2 weeks there. There you go. And the last book I'm going to tell you about is, again, these covers are insane. The last book I'm going to tell you about is called Trouble the Saints by Elia Dawn Johnson. It is coming out this fall. How amazing is that cover, first of all? I'm going to read you the pitch for this because it's just absolutely wonderful. The dangerous magic of the night circus meets the powerful historical exploration of the Underground Railroad in Elia Dawn Johnson's timely and unsettling novel set against a darkly glamorous backdrop of New York City, where an assassin falls in love and tries to change her fate at the dawn of World War II. Amid the whir of city life, a young woman from Harlem is drawn into the glittering underworld of Manhattan, where she's hired to use her knives to strike fear amongst its most dangerous denizens. 10 years later, Phyllis LeBlanc has given up everything, not just her own past and Dev, the man she loved, but even her own dreams. Still, the ghosts from her past are always by her side, and history has appeared on her doorstep to threaten the people she keeps in her heart. And so Phyllis will have to make a harrowing choice before it's too late. Is there ever enough blood in the world to wash clean generations of injustice? Trouble the Saints is a dazzling, daring novel, a magical love story, a compelling exposure of racial fault lines, and an altogether brilliant and deeply American saga. So, those are 20 books. And I feel like among those 20 books, I have given you middle grade realism, middle grade fantasy, YA realism, YA fantasy, YA anthology, a whole slew of crossover and adult science fiction, fantasy, dystopian, as well as nonfiction memoir, essays, comedy, and 3 books that don't come out yet so that you have something to look forward to after you have gone through and found some new works. With that in mind, I hope that you enjoyed this. I will post the full list of 20 in the comment right underneath this IGTV when it goes to my wall. And I hope that you find some new stories out there. I hope that you are staying safe and staying well, and that you find some new forms of escapism, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. Thanks, guys.